Hello everyone, answering the week 12 question. The first causal mechanism, I'm only going to discuss two for this post, is one is globalization / Americanization. Ahmed describes America, metaphorically, not politically, as a shallow, pleasure-seeking culture that focuses exclusively on the rights and needs of the individual rather than the organic community. This mindset is a threat to Islam because of its emphasis on community. On page 197, he says, the desire for wealth and overblown consumerism is the bread and butter of globalization, which needs expanding markets for its vast array of unnecessary and expensive products. I find two problems with that statement. One is, who defines what is overblown consumerism? And the next one is, how do you define what's unnecessary and too expensive? Could have answered that. He says that the me culture fuels globalization. He gives the example of the rich people with a shallow appearance of success, which is almost as important as success and wealth itself. He gives the example of the TV shows Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, shows of that nature where they're just showing off their material wealth. It's almost as if he believes that although he uses the lowercase g on globalization, it almost seems he should use an uppercase G. It's almost he makes it into a force that he almost feels powerless to overcome it. He says that media personalities in the West say that there is no choice but to accept globalization and try to survive within its confines. It is a matter of survival and not choice. So this is how globalization is a threat to traditional Islam. The second causal mechanism that he lists that I'm going to talk about is Islamophobia. This sentiment that this unreasonable fear of Americans, or within the West, of Islam. He mentions personalities such as Glenn Beck, who, quote, whips himself up into a frenzy of Islamophobia in almost every show. He also mentions Michael Savage, who, quote, espouses blatant hatred against Arabs and Muslims, and he lists several statements of Michael Savage that are very anti-Muslim. He mentions several religious figures. He says, well-known Christian leaders have not been living up to their own statements about love and justice for all. No bias there. He mentions Franklin Graham, Jerry Vines, and Jerry Falwell, all who made statements at one point in their life that are pejorative towards Islam. And he also mentions the Patriot Act, which he says has been challenged for trampling over the civil rights of Muslims and Arab immigrants. All throughout this railing against Islamophobia, I believe he is overgeneralizing. Michael Savage, for instance, has an audience of 10 million. While that's significant, and if you're in radio, that's pretty good, that still does not represent even 10% of the American population. There's a rally that he mentions where he says, we got to whoop up on the Muslims, and everybody's rah, 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 let's go get them, let's invade them, blah, you know. But how many people were in that? Were at that rally? 200 or 300, 2,000 or 3,000. Even if it's that much, it's still inconsequential. It doesn't represent the American population. And the preachers, Graham, Vines, and Falwell, they all had specific criteria for the statements that they made. And, for example, Jerry Falwell called Muhammad a terrorist. Well, maybe with his criteria, Muhammad fit the description of a terrorist. So it's not exactly right for him to call him out on that, unless he knows the context in which he said it. Okay, the causal mechanism that I would suggests that if he were to use it, it would have really strengthened his book, is to point out that Christianity and Islam simply have differences that are irreconcilable. He mentions on page 159 a newspaper article who is covering the work of a fellow by the name of Gulen, who is some kind of a Muslim activist working to heal relations between Christians and Muslims. And the newspaper report says Christianity and Islam are two ocean liners on a collision course in the middle of the ocean. And if both, and probably if Christianity, will more conform with Gulen, then instead of colliding, they'll be going in their own separate direction, doing their own thing. Well, this is not reasonable because of the expectations that Christians have for Christianity to spread throughout the world. Jesus said, "No man comes to the Father but by me." Islam says differently. You have the Great Commission, in which Jesus says to go into all the world and share the good news, the gospel. Baptize people in my name. You have Paul saying in Romans 3:19, all the world is guilty before God. So Christians have these scriptures, and they feel compelled to reach out to all the world, Muslims, Hindus, you name it, all the world. So it's not practical that the two are going to be like this, just doing their own thing, because Islam believes that Christians, well, maybe not as much as Christians. Christians want to reach out to the Muslims and save them. The Muslims kind of look down on Christianity, on Christians. They say, well, you're people of the book, so we'll let you live, but you're still in submission to Islam, even though we'll let you do your Christian thing. So that's not a practical thing. So my causal mechanism is just irreconcilable differences that they'll never, because of the serious nature of religion and with the expectations of the religion, they'll never see eye to eye.